Hi, this is Greg Downey with Perm Ventures. Are you looking at doing a Reg A, a Reg D, or a Reg CF offering for your company to raise capital, or not quite sure which vehicle to choose? Well, this next interview is going to be perfect for you. I had the opportunity to sit down with Kendall Almorico. He's an attorney by training. His office is in DC and in Tampa. He's become a friend. He's an expert in this space. Actually, Fortune magazine ranks him as one of the top people in the world on this subject. He's been featured in pretty much every major news network, magazine, cable show you can name, and he is an expert. So I hope you enjoy this content, and I'll stick around and I'll talk to you afterwards. Kendall, I appreciate you, making time for our viewers to hear right from a professional that knows this world extremely well when it comes to equity crowdfunding. I'm just going to brag on you just a little bit, and I want you to kind of enlighten our audience about your background as well. But you've been featured in Forbes magazine as one of the top thought leaders in equity crowdfunding. And one that was it top 19 crowdfunding experts that startups need to know about. You've been on, USA Today, New York Times, Washington Post, Huffington Post, New York Daily, Business Insider. You've been on a host of different cable news networks. I mean, you're the expert. And then I came by way of a mutual friend who did really well in crowdfunding. And I kind of asked him what his magic was. And he's like, well, you got to meet my lawyer. so
always
I
sounds scary when you say you got to meet my lawyer. It always usually terrifies people. But I think by the end of this podcast, people will be like, it's not like most lawyers. That's what I try to be.
Well, and just to also give you a little more, more accolades too, and just our interactions together, I tell folks is like, look, if you can find an attorney that obviously knows the law, but another one big benefit would be, do they understand business strategy? Do they have the strategic mind to help you navigate the waters and educate you and fun to work with? So, and you hit those marks, man. So I appreciate you making time for everyone. Just for everybody listening who maybe heard me speak too fast or didn't pick it all up, just tell me a little bit more about your background.
Sure. Well, as you said, Greg, I'm an attorney by trade, a securities attorney. And usually I don't lead with that because then people stop listening or don't want to talk to you or have to call their lawyers into the conversation. But the reality is I live in this world of equity crowdfunding where anyone can invest in a private business online. It doesn't matter how rich you are, how well connected you are. Anyone can invest in these companies. There's certain rules and regulations about how you do it and what can be done. And we'll talk about some of that today. But being a lawyer is just one small part of this process. The most important thing is you're helping people not just raise capital, but also grow their business. There's a big difference between going to the bank and taking out a loan and then using that money however you want to. And the bank's the only person you answer to versus you go out and raise $20 million from 50,000 small investors who gave you $500 or $400. And those people, want to be a part of your business. They want to help you. They want to help your business grow. They can become your marketing force. They can do all of these things. But if you just go into this process of, I'm going to raise money and all I'm going to do is raise the money and I don't care, you're missing out on a huge opportunity. And that's where I think I'm different than almost anyone else who does what I do. Because not only do I come in, Greg, with clients as their securities lawyer and handle all of that stuff with the SEC and all of the other things that have to be done, but I get involved at both the business and marketing level to make sure that they are doing things right, to be able to take this money in and do things with it in their business they need to do. So, and also to use that army of people that invested for the reason they invested. Most of these people are investing in an early stage company. They're like an angel investor. They're just not $1 million angel investor. They might be $100 angel investor, and they want to help. A lot of people do this just to be able to help, just to be a part of the process, just to be a part of the journey. And if you take their $100 and ignore them, they're not going to do anything to help you. It's just like, hey, I bought some stock the other day from my broker, and boy, I hope it goes up. Well, this is different. You're investing in an early stage at a company. That stock price isn't moving. But if you, the individual investor, and then multiply that times thousands, are helping by, let me post something on social media about this company. Let me tell people what they're doing. Hey, I just got this little bit of information from the CEO. Really cool thing. Let me tell people about it. You're helping the business grow. Let me go buy their products. Let me show their products to friends of mine. If it's a business, let me use their business. Let me show people, those are the things that you do with this that make this turn into a remarkable way to not just raise money and grow your business. And my background is not just, I didn't go to law school. My background is in television and film production. So I've been editing video since I was 14 years old, back before there were digital cameras and everybody carried around a little movie studio with them. I used to cut and paste and tape and put things together back in the old days. And so I have as much of a marketing mind as I do a legal mind. And so the big difference for me, and the reason that I've gotten all these accolades and all this media coverage, is probably not as much because I'm a pretty good lawyer and I know how to do this stuff, but it's because I bring to the table the whole package, and I can actually help people with everything from, hey, you got to have a really great video for this to work. You need to have a really well-designed page that people see and get excited and want to invest. You have to have emails that go out to people, ads that are running. There's a lot of things that happen. And you can go out and outsource that, which most people do. I have my lawyer, I have my accountant, I got my email marketing person, I've got my investor relations person, I've got this and that. But if you're doing that, you as the company owner have to manage all those people. So you bring in someone like me who not only does the legal work, but then I like to call this role, because of obviously my sports background, I call it the quarterback. I'm the guy out there on the field calling the signals, making sure the play gets run. I'm responsible for making sure things get done, but I'm not actually doing them. I'm not writing the social media posts or creating the ads. I'm reviewing them. I'm getting tips to the people. I'm making sure they get run. I'm doing all of those things. And I take that load off the business owner, so the business owner can run their business, not run a giant marketing campaign to help grow their business. So I do a little bit of both, and that's why I've been fortunate enough to be featured in just about every publication and get on all these lists. I actually had a website I'd never heard of before that ranks people, called Onalytica, about 5 years ago, called me the #1 crowdfunding influencer in the world. And I thought, wow, I don't even know what that means. But it's probably because I'm out there so much and I do so much, and I've done some of the biggest raises and had quite a big amount of success. And so it's nice to get that recognition and to also be able to help people along the way.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. And I think what's cool about exactly what you just described is that when people want to get into the crowdfunding, at least the experience that I had and working with our mutual friend Zane, is you don't go into this naively, right? You can put something on GoFundMe and send it to your friends and see what happens. But if you're going to be serious about this, trying to do this on your own and figuring it out can be expensive. It's time consuming. It's a headache. And it's kind of like why people come to Perham and say, look, I want to figure this out. I'm done beating my head against the wall. I want rocket boosters. I want to go. Help me, bring in a team. Let's go. And you're very much aligned with that. I mean, that's what you do. Is you're a SWAT team in a box, if you will, that knows how to dissect all this stuff and make sense of it. So someone going into this they're going to get the maximum success possible. So that's most attorneys don't do that.
No, and I think most attorneys are afraid to do it, because most attorneys are trained to just practice law, don't do anything else. Be a lawyer, be independent. And I tell people, and believe me, I have people sign waiver forms and all kinds of legal things to let me do what I do, because most lawyers they're afraid to step outside the box of just being a lawyer. I've always been just as much of a businessman and an entrepreneur as I am as a lawyer. And so it would be ridiculous for me not to be involved with the other parts of this, because I don't want to just file some legal documents with the SEC and deal with, regulators and things like that, and then hope that you're going to run the campaign the right way. I like to be involved from the beginning to make sure that everything's getting done. And that's where people like you also in Perm come into effect. One of the things that's incredibly important is that people are ready corporate wise to raise money. I have people that come to me that, it's funny when you look at my clientele. I have companies that come to me that are literally pure startups, where it's just one person with an idea. And it's rare that I get involved with those people, but sometimes I do, because sometimes I'm like, wow, this is really an amazing thing. Let me start from the very beginning and help them. Most of the companies are operating. Most of the companies are already, maybe generating revenues or some, but aren't really what we would call successful yet. And then I have companies that are worth over $1 billion that hire me to do this, not because they need to raise money so much, but because it's such a great way to build their customer base and build their client base and build their exposure, while having people invest in their company, paying them money to become their marketing force. So it's It's
Brilliant.
remarkable when you get to that stage that you can just keep doing this, even if you don't need the money. You're doing great. Sales are great. You're profitable. Well, gosh, I can get people to pay me to then buy my products and then spread the word about me. Why wouldn't you do it? So but it all comes back to having everything set up from the beginning the right way. And I'm not the guy who sets up their corporation and makes sure their cap tables are right and their stocks are right. That's usually done by their corporate lawyer. And a lot of times people just aren't set up for that. And they need people like you, Greg, who can come in and go, there's a lot of stuff you have to be ready for. You got to know how to make a pitch deck. You got to know how to, all the things that you do so well. But if I'm involved, as we are, with people together, I'm working with you too. So I'm there with you, Greg. Listen, hey, I've got an idea. I know that's really a great way to do it if you're doing X. But since we're going to be doing this regulation CF offering, let's do Y here because it'll be a little different and it'll make it easier later on down the line. So I'm not creating the documents or doing the things that you do or training people to do the things you do, but I'm working right alongside you to make sure that you're doing it in a way that's going to help when I get involved with the capital raise and the building of the business and all of that stuff too. So it's fun to be able to work with great people like you and great people out there that have all these specialties and to be able to sort of, guide along the way without stepping on anybody's toes.
Absolutely, man. No, it's fun stuff. It's not for the faint of heart, but it's a blast.
No, it's not. It's not at all.
So let's if you can paint kind of the picture, right? So from a legal landscape, right? So a lot of people come to us, looking to raise capital, looking for investment. You hear Reg D. Reg D is a very common way to raise capital. If you, with your legalese, can you describe Reg D for our audience, when it makes sense, when it doesn't make sense, and then maybe transition to what Reg A is, and then Reg CF? I think that'd be awesome.
No, it's, this all starts with a company going, I need to raise money. And in a lot of cases, it's, I need to raise money and no one's going to give me a bank loan unless I put my house up as collateral, or I could run up my credit cards at 28% interest and hope that I can somehow pay them back. Or I can, and I hate to use this term, but it's very commonly used, I can use OPM, other people's money. And other people's money comes to you usually in the form of an investment in your company. So it's not, sometimes it could be a loan or sometimes it could be other things, but generally they're investing in you. They're investing in your company. They want your company to succeed and they're willing to buy part of your company from you to help you succeed. And everyone thinks that's an easy thing to do. I use this example all the time. If I wanted to start a lawn mowing business when I was 16 years old with my next door neighbor and go, just mow lawns in the neighborhood, you started a business, and if your father says, well, I'm going to give you $100 to go buy whatever, some equipment you need, and your father is not loaning that money to you, and he says, hey, I want 10% of the money you make back for the money I gave you. He's just invested in your company. You have sold him a security. And when you sell securities, anytime someone invests in your company, when you sell securities, you are now governed by securities law, which means there's the federal government, the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, and then there is every state has their own securities laws that you have to deal with. And if you're dealing with foreign countries, you have foreign country laws to deal with. It's the most highly regulated area that there is. It's incredible the number of rules you have to follow. So the number one rule you have to follow, and this is where we get to your question, Greg, is you're bringing in an investor and you have to either do one of two things. You either have to limit the kinds of people who can invest in your company to the rich people, accredited investors, or you can take in money from anybody you want anywhere in the world. And let's just refer to those as not accredited investors, but they're just normal people. So if your next door neighbor wants to invest in your company and he makes $100,000 a year and has a net worth of $500,000, he's doing pretty well, lives in a nice house, has good net worth, that's all great. He's not considered an accredited investor by the government. The government doesn't think that person's smart enough to invest in something unless, they can't invest in things unless you can find a way to let them do it. So the first step in every investment process is to figure out how do you legally do this? And the number one way is what's called Reg D, Regulation D, part of the Securities Act. Regulation D says you can have private company. Now, We're not talking about companies on stock exchanges, what we call public companies. That's a different animal. We're talking about someone who started a business, it's still private, and they're trying to raise capital. Those people have to have an exemption from the Securities and Exchange Commission to raise money under so that they don't become a public company. That sounds confusing, but think about it this way. Apple's out there, a great company, huge company. Apple started as a private company. They were just a couple guys in a garage that decided to start a business. They eventually became a public company. That means that anybody could buy stock on the stock exchange or from a stockbroker or what have you. But when they took in money from all the investors leading up to that point, those were all Regulation D investors. They were rich people, accredited investors who wanted to own a part of the company, who bought stock from them. And because Regulation D is one of the exemptions, as we call it, from being registered as a public company, Apple was able to take in money from accredited investors only, just rich people, people that make $200,000 a year or have over $1 million of net worth. Those are the only people that could invest under Reg D. There's some exceptions to that. I'm trying to make it as basic and simple as possible, but as a general rule, you don't want to be doing Regulation D offerings and taking in money from non-accredited investors. You're only supposed to bring in money from rich people. That's how most companies are funded. Almost all companies are funded that way at the beginning. And it's the most common way to do it. It's pretty simple. It doesn't require a whole lot of work with the SEC. It just requires one simple form to be filed that says you're doing this. Not a lot of state law interference with the process. If somebody doesn't complain, generally it goes very smoothly. But it's also a difficult way to raise money because you got to find rich people who want to invest. And rich people get thousands of proposals to invest in everything every day. Not every day, but constantly being bombarded with opportunities to invest in things. So unless you know the people or have some connection or have some outrageously great idea, chances are it's difficult to raise money under that scenario. So that's the way the world was for 80 years here in the US. And then what happens? We have this big financial crisis in 2007 and 2008. And all of a sudden, nobody's investing. You can't borrow money from the bank. You can't pick up the phone and call Bank of America and say, I need a $100,000 line of credit. And they'll go, yeah, like they used to back in 2006, 2005. Anybody could get a line of credit for a business. All that money dries up. Where are we going to get money? So people start promoting to Congress this idea of crowdfunding, and had worked online with things like Kickstarter, where people would fund a product. You didn't invest in the company. You don't own part of the company, but you give them $300 now. And then when that fancy watch they're making comes out, you get it for the $300 that you gave them to develop the watch. But you don't own part of the company. The company's profitable or gets sold, you don't get any benefit. And people were seeing this happening pretty successfully online, and went in, people that I know very, very well, went to Congress and got Congress to pass a law called Regulation A, which was actually an update of an old law, and Regulation Crowdfunding, or Reg CF as we call it, which are two laws that allow anyone, not just rich people, anyone in the general public to invest in private companies. And those are exemptions from registration, which means you can raise money this way if you follow the rules, and you don't have to go to the SEC and say, hey, I am now registering with you as a public company. I am now going to have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars every year on compliance and legal fees and accounting fees and reports and things that you have to do when you're a public company. You don't have to do any of those things. You just have to follow the rules of Regulation D, Regulation A, or Regulation CF, and then you can raise money from whatever those categories let you raise. So I hope that wasn't too esoteric. It's a lot easier when you talk about them individually, but I think that kind of lays the groundwork of you're bringing in money from anywhere. There's no such thing as friends and family, and that doesn't mean you have to go through Reg D, or I'm just raising money from my friend or my neighbor or whatever. Every single dollar you raise when you go into a fundraising mode and you're selling part of your company, you have to have one of these exemptions. And once you have it, you just have to follow the rules.
Mm-hmm. No, excellent. No, I appreciate you painting that story and the history. Like I didn't know. I knew when Regulation CF hasn't really been around a long time, but I didn't know as a result of the financial crisis. So that's interesting.
Yeah, it's really interesting how it popped up. I mean, for 80 years, if you were rich, you could invest in anything. For 80 years, if you wanted to, someone wanted to invest in Apple when it came out, or Microsoft, or any of these behemoth, Google, Amazon, they weren't allowed to invest in them. Even if they wanted to, nobody could invest in those but rich people until they became public companies. And so it was a remarkable sea change. Most of us call it the democratization of the investment process, because now companies could go to their friends, their family who weren't rich and say, put $100 into my company, get a little piece of it. Just go along for the ride with me, or put $100,000 in if you want to. But there was no rules about, you're not allowed to invest, as there had been literally since the securities laws went into effect in the 1930s.
Okay. Interesting. So let me ask you this. So got my company. I want to raise, let's say say 5 million. Mm-hmm. How do I, in my brain here, figure out which is the best flavor to go with? Can you help me there?
Yeah, it all depends. And every situation is unique. So you have to kind of look at each company and decide. But at $5 million, you would have three options, and they're the three that we mentioned before: Regulation D, Regulation CF, which is crowdfunding, or Regulation A, which is crowdfunding, but it's just a bigger level. Mm-hmm. With Regulation D, you can raise an unlimited amount of money. There's no restriction on how much you can raise, so $5 million is okay. With Regulation A, you're allowed to raise up to $75 million in 1 year, and you can have anyone in the general public invest. Whereas with Regulation D, it's only accredited investors. So now you've opened up this whole world of new investors, and you can raise up to 75 million. But there's a lot of rules. There's some reporting, there's some SEC review process. It's more expensive to do than Regulation CF, Regulation Crowdfunding. And I'm just going to call it Reg CF from here on out. Mm-hmm. Reg CF allows you to raise up to $5 million, very limited amount of review and process with the SEC. You basically file a document and then you go and raise money, versus a lot of review and back and forth and comments and negotiations. So it's the cheapest way to do it. It's the most effective way to do it for, $5 million. You've got those three options. What you really look at that point is, which is best for my company. So if you're a brand new company, a startup, you're a guy who lives in his parents' house, you've got a great idea. You've got no network whatsoever. You don't know anybody. You have no social media. You've got zero friends. I'm sorry, I'm painting this horrible picture of a person. But I'm trying to give you...
me, man. Sorry.
I know for sure that's not the case. You moved out of your parents' garage not that long ago. So
it's right.
But the bottom line is, if you have someone who just has nothing out there to go to invest, well, crowdfunding, Regulation CF and Regulation A require you to go find investors. There's not a magic button. I always say it's not the field of dreams. You don't build this thing online and go, hey, people just start running to you and investing. It is literally, you've got to drive people to the page online where they can learn about your company and invest. And so if you don't have a network, and you don't have people that you know, and you don't have a social media audience, or let's say you have a partner who's an influencer who has got 1 million followers online, they can reach a lot of people really quickly. Or a business partner who's one of your, you're going to be doing part of your business with, and they have a big audience. But if you don't have people to go to, then the crowdfunding rules are very difficult to make work unless you just buy a lot of advertising. If you pay money and put your message in front of people, you can still raise the money, but it's going to cost you a lot of money to run digital ads and do all those other things. So generally, most people start with Reg D. They start with, let's see who the rich people are we can get to. Let's see who the rich people are we know. Let's go pitch this to them. And if we can bring in money that way, great. So now you've got the options of Reg D and Reg A and Reg CF. And Reg CF is far cheaper. It's easier to get live. It doesn't cost as much to do. It is the same kind of marketing required. Someone in that situation, 95% of the time, would go with Reg CF. If there's reasons to use Reg A that are probably a little too esoteric to go into right now. And some cases we might suggest they go into Reg A instead. But Reg CF is probably the easiest way to go if you're trying to raise $5 million and under, and you want to help build a crowd for your business and build your business and your marketing and all of those things at the same time. That's generally what I would recommend to most people.
In our firm, I never see Reg A. I just, we've
rare.
done deals where it's $500,000 and we have all the way up to 70 million. we've see a lot of Reg D, but now with the social media and the marketing, I mean, I think you said it early on perfectly, which is people are investing in your company and they're promoting your message at the same time. You're getting in people to promote who you are, and they're giving you capital that's necessary to run your business and potentially clients in the future. So,
Yes.
I mean, there's so many interesting synergies. That's why I wanted to do this interview with this going, you're a professional at it. Tell me some of the successes. What have you seen in as long as you've been doing this? I mean,
Sure. Well, and before I talk to the success stories, let me address what you just said, because this is actually very, very important. One of the reasons that people use Reg A versus Reg CF or Reg D is because when you sell stock under Regulation A, it's liquid immediately, which means your investors can sell it the next day to anybody they want. So if they've got a neighbor, who wants to buy the stock from them, or if they've got to get out of the deal, they need the money desperately, they can just go online and sell it to somebody if they can find a buyer. It's also the only one of these that allows you to directly list and become a public company. So if you're really far along and you don't want to spend all the money to go through an IPO, and you don't really need to raise more than $75 million in your IPO, you can actually use Regulation A as a far cheaper alternative to go public and do an IPO. So those are some of the reasons you see it, but again, it's a very rarefied area to go into. So success story wise, the funny thing is, Greg, up until about a year and a half ago, you could only raise $1 million in Reg CF, and most companies that were coming to me needed more than $1 million. So every one of them were doing Reg A. Once Reg CF got bumped up to $5 million, it became the go-to way to go. And there's been a lot of companies that have raised $5 million doing Reg CF in the past. But when you talk about overall success stories, obviously every company started out as a Reg D company for the most part until 8 or 9 years ago when all these laws went into effect. So your success stories would be the ones I mentioned. Google, Apple, they were all Reg D companies at one point, which is funny to think that they had private investors coming in, sometime, and now those people are worth billions. Reg A success stories. So I was fortunate when these laws, Reg A and Reg CF, were passed in 2012. One of my favorite historical funny stories about this is, there are 5 different bills that were put in front of Congress. And Congress loved all of these, because who's going to turn down something that, or pass along something that, not pass along something that basically says, we're going to let small businesses raise money, and we're going to let people invest in these. It's kind of a no-brainer. Why not? But the 5 laws that they put together were so different. Reg CF is so different than Reg A, even though they should just be the exact same law and just with different limits. They have different requirements and all this crazy stuff. And instead of Congress doing what they should do, which is bring in some people like me and go, hey, could you just work this out and turn this into one thing, and we'll just pass this law. They passed it all in one big picture called the Jobs Act. And the Jobs Act has all of these things in it, but they're different laws. And the funny part about it is, I think 75 to 80% of all the House and the Senate voted for this. So there's very little opposition to it. It went through, with flying colors. But it took a while to get it there, because there were these different laws that nobody really understood. And then some congressional staffer said, why don't we call it the Jobs Act? And people will think it's about jobs, and then they're definitely going to all vote for it. And so Jobs Act, true story.
Marketing.
Jobs Act, it's marketing. Jobs stands for Jumpstart Our Business Startups Act. That's literally what Jobs stands for. It doesn't really have to do with jobs. But anecdotally, that's how it got passed so well. Well, I'm not going to vote against creating jobs. It's really kind of funny. So ultimately, this all comes into effect, and now people have the option of doing all these different kind of cool ways that they can raise money, depending on which one makes the most sense for them. The biggest success story and there's been a lot of them in the equity crowdfunding world, is a company called BrewDog. And BrewDog was a craft brewer in Scotland who had already been successful in the EU and through most of Europe, and decided they wanted to come to the United States and open a $30 million brewery and bring their beer, which is very well known in Europe, over to the USA. And They hired me. We thought we were going to be the first Regulation A offering ever. We ended up being the third one. But it was kind of cool to go with a company who had already done this in the UK under laws that existed over there already. So they came in knowing how to do it. They needed someone to really kind of work with the US laws, and also, marketing messages are different in different countries, and how do you market to America versus, someone in Great Britain. A lot of those things that I helped with. But Brewdog is now worth somewhere between a billion and a half and $2 billion as a company. They have breweries in, I think, 5 countries now, maybe Australia, Germany, UK, and here. They have raised over $200 million using equity crowdfunding in various forms. They have over 200,000 individual small investors, and they have been profitable, I think, 8 or 9, 10 years in a row as a business, as a result of the fact that they have this giant army of people that talk about them online all the time, buy their beer, serve their beer at parties, go into restaurants and say, why aren't you selling Brewdog beer? And so, all of those things, they did it from the very beginning, knowing that this was not just about raising capital. This was about brand building. And they treated it like that. They had an open forum on their website where their investors could talk to the CEO. He would literally get on there every day and converse with people that had given them $50 in some cases,
Wow.
and treated them just like they should be treated. You have to go into this. It's so hard to get this into people's brains, but I will preach this and preach this and preach this. You have to treat every investor, whether they gave you $200, $20, or $200,000, the same way. You may give them different perks or something. If you invest $200,000, you get X, Y, and Z. If you invest $20, you just get X. You can do that at the beginning and people understand that. But when they come to you with a question, or they have an idea, or they want to share something with you, or they're just curious about something, you need to treat them the same. You don't go, this guy only gave us $200. I'm not going to talk to him. Let me go talk to the $20,000 person. You have to treat people like they're owners in the business for this to, you're going to get the money already anyway. But if you want them to be your brand ambassadors, you want them out there talking about your business and really championing you, which is what the whole purpose of this is in my book, you got to treat these people the right way. And that takes a little bit of time, or somebody whose job is to make sure they stay on top of this. And, investor relations is very important, to make sure people know what's going on with the company and, stay in touch with them. Don't just ignore them. It's real simple though, Greg. I'll give you an example. I generally have my clients, I tell them at least once every 2 weeks, but maybe, once a week if you can do it. Just set aside a time, Friday morning, 10 o'clock. You're going to sit down in front of a camera just like we're doing, and you're going to give a 5-minute update to your investors. Hey, investors, this is Kendall Almerico, CEO of whatever. Just want to let you know, this week we were having conversations with Walmart about getting our product, and I don't know if it's going to happen or not, but it's really exciting because this is a big deal for us. And oh, by the way, we just got our first stores in the state of Virginia, and that's really cool. That just happened this week. Basically just give them a little update like you would to your business partners. Nothing not behind the scenes secret stuff that can't be let go, but treat them like that. Take that, videotape it, post it in an investors only section of the website, send out an email to all your investors, go, hey, there's a new update from CEO Kendall Almerico online. That's it. It literally takes 15 minutes to do. 15 minutes. If people can't take 15 minutes to talk to their investors once a week, I don't want them as clients. Because it's the single most important thing. Open rates on those emails that my clients is usually 60 to 75%. People watch those videos because they're short. They know they're getting an update. They may not watch every one of them, but the number of people, if you're doing a series of these offerings where it's not just one off and then you don't come back again, because a lot of my clients do this, like I said, to build customer bases. A lot of people will reinvest right after watching that video. Like literally can see video hit my email. I just saw the email came in from one of my clients. Let me go check over here. Boom, 5 new investors just came in. They're not new. They're just people re-upping and putting more in.
I didn't even think about that. That's brilliant. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Because with a Reg D, once you're with the Reg D, when you're closed, you're closed, right? You're done.
Done.
But wow, what a great, because once the capital comes in and you start generating momentum to be able to report that information back to your investors, and they can continue to put capital in. Wow.
And that's one of the reasons why people use Reg A too. Reg A, I can keep a Reg A open for 3 years if I want to. So, a lot of times we'll raise the initial capital we need through a Reg CF, then we'll do a Reg A, and we'll just let people invest as they come in. We may not market it heavily. It doesn't cost a lot to keep it up and running, and so it's just money may drip in, $5,000, $10,000 a week sometimes, or what have you, but it's found money at that point. It's generally people reinvesting in the company. It's usually people that are excited. Hey, I just went to my grocery store and I now see my product that I didn't realize was going to be here. Now it's on the shelves. I'm putting more money in. And Greg just came on here and told me that we're about to go into Massachusetts. Wow, I'm really excited about that. Let me throw in another couple $100. I have one. It's funny. Sorry, I get so excited about this stuff because it's so funny that I used to say to people, this is going to happen. You're going to get people that keep reinvesting and do this over and over. I always tell people, don't minimize that $200, $100, $50 investor, because that person may have just been seeing what this is all about. They may be rich as all hell and they may be ready to put in $500,000, but they just want to make sure this is legit. They want to see the process. And then you've treated them like they've invested in big deals before. Nobody ever treated them like this. And they're treating you that way for $50. I have people that routinely put in, say, $200 every Friday into companies. Like they just every Friday you see another $200 come in from them. I have people that have invested 35 and 40 times in a company that went from $100 investor to a total of 30 or 40, $50,000 over time. And it's not because we're out there asking them for money. We never ask them for money, never ask them for money. It's just, they're like, I want to put more money in. So it's a remarkable way when you do it right. And like I said, it's not the field of dreams. You can't just set it up and hope it works. It takes some effort. It takes some teamwork. It takes some people like me sometimes going, hey, Greg, you didn't send out it's been 2 weeks. Where's your video? Somebody has to sit there and kind of make sure it's going on sometimes, but it's a remarkable way to see things grow.
No, that's incredible. I didn't even think about the posts, like just continue to market and raise capital. What about valuation? So is valuation important in Reg CF for your average investors? Or that's one question. The second question is, as you're progressing, let's say you've raised, a decent amount of money. Now you just have hit some critical milestones. You'd think the valuation would potentially go up. Do you have to stop a Reg CF and then open another one, or does the valuation change? Is that locked? How does that work?
Yeah, so that's really one of the more interesting things about how this works, and also plays into the psychology of getting people to invest again, which you'll probably can kind of see the writing on the wall of what I'm going to say. But once you start a Regulation A, Regulation D, or a Regulation CF offering, if you change the valuation, it becomes a new offering. Okay, so technically with Reg D, it's not quite as big of a deal, because you just kind of change your private documents, and there's a few things you do, because you're dealing with rich people, and the government assumes rich people are investing, they know what they're doing, we don't protect them as much. But these poor idiots who invest $50, they don't know what they're doing. That's literally how the government sees the average investor, and it drives me insane.
I thought that was just general people. That's how they look at the general population. No,
they do. Oh, they do. It just makes me ill, because they just don't understand this. And meanwhile, I can, that same idiot that they don't think is very important and doesn't know what they're doing can walk into a casino and put their entire paycheck on a black on the roulette wheel and hope that it doubles, or buy 1,000 lottery tickets. There's no limitations on what they can do with their money when it comes to gambling. But when they invest, the government says you're not allowed to invest in certain companies unless you do certain things. And then they limit the amount that those people can invest based on their income. So it really makes no sense in the real world, but it's very important because of what you're talking about. And that's where we get into valuation. So a company has to set a stock price if they're going to sell stock, right? And unlike where the market's going to set it for you, if you're doing an IPO or you're a public company where you're already trading, people are like, well, I don't think it's worth $50 a share. I think it's only worth $40, so they don't pay for it. And the stock price goes up and down. In all of these private offerings that we're talking about, Reg A, Reg D, Reg CF, your price is the same no matter what. It doesn't change while you're doing that same offering. So if we start a Reg CF, Reg A, or Reg D offering, and you've got let's say a $10 million valuation for your company, and you want to sell $1 million worth of stock, you've just sold 10% of your company, right? Everybody in that offering is going to pay the same thing. There's some little things you can do in there, but just for the general sake of this, they're all investing at a $10 million valuation. You know it's $10 million. You know you're selling 10% of your company. All your other investors know that they're going to get diluted by 10% in the number of shares that they own. That's just very much across the board how it works. But you as a company get to set that valuation. So if you wanted to say, and I highly do not recommend doing this, but if you wanted to say, I'm a brand new company, I've never done anything, I'm worth $1 billion, and I'm going to raise $1 million, you can do that under any of these rules. No one's going to stop you from doing it, except the market. People will read the documents sometimes and see what's going on and go, this is ridiculous, I'm not giving them any money. So to a certain degree, the market will control the valuation, but you as a company get to set it. And as long as it's reasonable, no one's really going to come in and say anything or do anything. Most people aren't going to even really know. They're going to look and say, it's $10 a share and I can put $100 into this, I'll do it. Really always understand what's going on there. On the other hand, you go through, let's take your scenario, which is the perfect scenario of why you do more than one of these. Once you're successful the first time, you got this whole group of people that gave you money. You've been in touch with them. You've shown them you were going to do what you said, I'm raising this money to do X, you go do X, right? You raised it at a $10 million valuation. These people are like, wow, Greg told me every week what was going on. He sent me an email. He showed me the stuff. I knew before anybody else did that, they feel like they're part of it, right? So now you get to the point where you go, we got to go raise another couple $1 million, or maybe you just want to keep it going and get more customers for your business. Now you do a second offering and you raise your valuation because you, like you said, you had to hit certain metrics, whatever they are. They don't have to be economic necessarily, but let's say your revenues have doubled or tripled in a year because of the money you raised, and you built a plant that you didn't have before. And now all of a sudden it's a different world. You're an operating business and you're doing really well. Now let's double our valuation. Let's make it, instead of $10 a share, we're going to make it $20 a share. So now the valuation is, using round numbers, $20 million. Now you get to go back to all those people that invested the first time and say, on paper, it's all on paper, your investment's already doubled. We're out raising more money. If you'd like to come in and invest again, this is what we're going to do with this next 2 million. But they also kind of know there's probably another one coming or another one coming or another one coming. And so, it's a very effective way to get people that have invested before to come back in and invest, but it only works if you are reasonable in your valuations every time you do it. And if you got something to back them up with. If you took that $1 million and squandered it and nothing happened with your company's in the exact same situation it was in before you raised it, and you go out and try to raise your valuation and raise more money, never going to work. No one's going to invest,
Yeah.
So got to do it right, got to show results. And one of the things that I'm sure you're good at this also, Greg, because this is part of, being reasonable with people. Don't overestimate, don't overpromise and underperform. When you say, I'm raising $1 million, don't say, I'm going to take my product nationwide and it's going to be in every Walmart, Costco, and, every grocery store in the world in a year, because that's never going to happen, right? But if you say, we're doing this to do X, Y, and Z, and those are attainable goals and they're reasonable, hey, I've got to hire 3 people because I can't do this by myself anymore. And we're going to go to this new facility to start producing our stuff. And I'm pretty sure we can get in a couple of grocery store chains. And again, I'm using consumer products as an example. It's not always consumer products, but making those kind of promises to people and then doing them, which are all very doable within a few months, bingo. Now you go out the next time, you go, all right, now we're going to double our distribution and we're going to buy a little bit of a bigger plant and, we're going to get into 20 chains, but we need $3 million to do that. It's just keeping it reasonable and not over promising and then underperforming, because that's the death knell for any kind of, capital raise. You promised something, you didn't do it. You're not going to, next time around, it's going to be bad.
Good luck. Yeah, no, we advise our clients, on those terms, right? We have people that come in going, I want to raise $5 million more. Well, why? And we're, well, I'm going to do this, and this. I mean, show me your use of funds. And they couldn't spend $5 million if they tried. So we're going,
exactly.
Let's map out 18 months and let's figure out, and we go through their business planning going, show me the major milestones that you can hit over the next 30, 60, 90, 120 days, like attainable. And let's hit those. And then you could, if you want to close that round, raise your valuation, you can do different things. But again, this is where we get into valuation. What are you spending? What do you really need money for? And I would say a good good chunk of our clients, we really start diving into the financials. They're going, oh, wow. Well, and sometimes it's under, right? We're going, well, Murphy's Law is always going to show up. Don't have it down on the nickel. We tell people, like, come up with your budget, add 20% minimum,
Right.
just
Minimum.
because, your investors aren't going to get mad at you. That's smart, right? But you're absolutely right. If you don't hit those milestones and you don't, you're dead in the water to go back out. I just love the Reg CF aspect of the constant communication. And again, working with someone like you provide that blueprint. And I think that's where I think is so important I think people look at Kickstarter of going, well, I'll just raise money. It's different. It's a different animal. They still take their fees and no one's really coaching you on how to do this, right? Yeah. If you really want your company successful and you're serious, get some smart people around you as fast as you can that are experts at what they do, and just absorb the information, right? And I've been a part of, a lot of different startups, right? And helped a lot of different companies, but you'd be surprised, and you probably actually wouldn't, where you bring in an expert, well, I imagine with you, with probably another legal team, right? Is, sometimes you get in these environments where, even though you've got the brain power, you've got the experience, and you're the subject matter expertise, when you're providing that guidance, there's that one, you can't fix crazy, right? So it's going, some people see that as a threat rather than, hey, I'll suck that knowledge up and let this person guide me to the promised land and we'll all win together, right?
You're right.
It's
good advisors are also smart about the way they do things. And I know you do this, and this is why it's such a delight to work with you and your clients. When you go to people and you say, this is the way to do something, I don't tell people this is the only way to do something unless it's the only way to do it and I'm 100% sure it's the way they need to do it. I'll give them options. I'll tell them, there's different ways to do this. This is what I recommend. But in some cases, I say, you have to do this, like those, videos and that I talked about before. If you're not going to commit to doing that, I don't want to work with you, because I know you're going to be really upset when you decide a year after this you're going to raise your money, you're going to be happy. And then you're going to go, boy, I wish I had engaged those 1,000 people that gave me money, because now I'd like them to buy my product or come to my place or whatever. And they're going to be like, we haven't heard from you in a year. What, why are you asking us now to do something? But it's really simple. I will often tell people, this is what I think you should do. And I'll give it, especially in the marketing world, because marketing is a different, can of worms, right? Mm-hmm. You may think it's the greatest idea. I may think it's the greatest idea, and it may fall flat. It just happens. You never know what the general public's going to say about anything. So there are times where I'll make a recommendation, say, let's try something, but I don't preach to them, you have to do this. If I tell people they have to do it and they ignore me, that's the situation you have. And that's somebody I don't want to work with, because you paid me to tell you how to do something and now you're ignoring me. On the other hand, if we try something together that we both know may not work, but it seems like it should work and we all agree it'll work, I'm going to bust my ass to make that thing work. And if it doesn't work, at least we don't look back and go, well, there was a naysayer over here who said not to do it. That's okay. You go in knowing you're taking a chance on something like that. So, it is a little bit of both worlds, but the ones I know pretty early on when I'm dealing with people that aren't going to listen to me, and I generally just withdraw and don't charge them anything. I just want to get out, because I don't need to be frustrated. And it's very rare, very rare.
Well, the other thing is that's a great segue, right? So you're the best in the biz, right? It's you're and
at least that's what my press clippings say.
Hey, well, sure. They walk in.
You
those
believe
shoes,
what you read on the internet. I am by far the most important person in the world of crowdfunding. So if you believe everything on the internet,
own it, man, own it. Oh, yes, you can. Everything on the internet is true.
It's all true, isn't it?
It is.
They wouldn't print it if it wasn't.
Everything. Nobody lies to you. So so I know you're selective, right? You're not hungry for business. Like, you've got your name's out there. People know who, the people that need to know who you are, right? So I guess tell me, what do you look for in a client, and what's your process? More like kind of, timelines, the different things you get involved in, if you can kind of paint that picture for someone that's maybe listening to this or watching this online going, hey man, I really want to, see if I can fit in this and onto your list of clients. Sure. A little bit that would be very helpful.
And it's funny because I don't know that I choose clients to work with the same way most people do. Um, I guess the businessman in my head, the first thing that it does is it looks at this and says, is this going to work? Is this going to be viable? If somebody came to me with a brand new algorithm that will change the way Google does their searches, and it's probably $1 billion idea, and this person is a genius, and I know that what they're saying is right, and it's literally going to make $1 billion. I still don't know that I can convince people to invest in it in the general public through a 1-minute video and explaining something online. I'll take that into Reg D and I'll go to Silicon Valley, the people that throw money at the most moronic things and get the money in about 2 seconds, right? But I wouldn't recommend going to, the crowd and trying to explain to people that don't understand it. Like when they explain it to me, I'd be like, I don't even know what you're talking about. How am I going to explain this to another person? And if that part of me in my businessman head always is the first step, is this something that people, is this a good business idea that's a good fit for marketing to get people to invest in it? And that's usually the first step. Second step is on the more personal level. If I'm not interested in what they're doing, I'm not going to do it, because I have to be selective, and it's a very close working relationship. I mean, I'm talking to my clients constantly, sometimes some of them 2 or 3 times a day. I'm part of their business. And if I don't enjoy what they're doing or like the people, I'm not going to get involved. But that's not, hey, I don't want people to come to me and be all smiley and try to become my friend. It's more just I work with people I may not necessarily like, but at least I appreciate them. And it's not to say a negative thing about anybody. It's just they have to be the right type of person that wants to do this. And I think they can do it. And I like what they're doing. And so those are very subjective, unfortunately. So let me talk about the more objective things for people that are out there, because there's other people that do what I do, not people that do it all together, but there are other people out there that do this. And if you want to do equity crowdfunding, there are people that can do the legal work and the marketing work and all of that for you. The things that are important from a, number one, is the company viable? Is this an actual company that's set up to do this, which is where Purim and people like you come in, because they got to have the right corporate structure and the right number of shares and understand what a deck looks like and all of those things, and just be ready to do this stuff. Are they there, or can they get there? That's one of the first questions. Second question is, do they have an audience already? And this is a huge, huge part of the equity crowdfunding world. Because as I mentioned at the very beginning of this, if someone comes to me and they have no audience, that doesn't mean they won't be successful. I've done really well with a couple of companies that had zero audience, but we knew we had to build an audience from the very beginning. And we did things to help do that. Go out and bring an influencer into the business who can attract 1 million people with one social media post. Set aside, $100,000. I'm talking about huge numbers here for advertising and public relations and things that can get your name out there. There are companies that are willing to do that, because it's also good for their company. But if you don't have some kind of audience, I mean, the best clients in the world for what I do are people that come to me. They're an existing business. They've been doing well. They have a customer base already who loves what they're doing. Their customer base is passionate about what they do. We know we can go to that customer base and raise a lot of money really quickly by sending an email to them that costs nothing. So literally for no marketing costs, if you have 10,000 really happy customers who are spreading the word about you online already and love what you're doing, we can probably get 5% of them to invest in the company with one email. So sometimes, these are the things I look at is there an audience already? If not, how do we build one? What's the easiest way to do that? And then this is another subjective one, but it's probably not as subjective as I make it out to be. Does this idea, I'm going to use the wrong term here, but it's the term I use all the time. Is it sexy? Is it something people will be interested in? Can I get fed an ad on my, Instagram page or the side of my Gmail or something that catches my eye? Like, I wonder what that's all about. Is it something, if you know nothing about the company and I pitch the right thing to you, you're going to click on something or want to learn more? That's really important, because again, take that Google algorithm idea, right? How do you put that in an ad? You show a picture of a real nerdy guy in front of a computer with calculations all around him. And who's
I mean,
going to
not
click
so
on that,
well.
right?
Not,
Yeah, you're
not
well,
sexy.
yeah, and it doesn't have to be like, sexy. I had a client who had one of the most unsexy businesses in the world. He basically helps people create. He helps people that sell products on Amazon through their own store on Amazon. He basically goes in and fixes their store. Has an incredible success rate of doing this. Incredible client list. Just does real well. Wanted to raise some money to expand and raise the money in almost no time, like $1 million, which was the limit at the time under Reg CF. And it was because he just called people he knew. You know, they weren't accredited investors, so they wouldn't have been able to invest before. He just called up all the people that he'd worked with. Hey, I helped build your store, from $10,000 in sales to $500,000 in sales. You interested in investing in what I'm doing? Yeah, I'll put in $5,000. I think he raised $370 or $380,000 in one day just from making phone calls.
Wow.
Think
Let
about
me
it.
let me ask you a quick
And
question.
that starts the momentum
Yeah.
going, and then those people tell people, and he raised the money in no time. So not a sexy business, hard to explain. No one's going to click on that ad because there's no ad to click on, but it can be done.
Right. So I know with working with Zane, and he did Kickstarter, right? And you've got to get to your limit before they release
Yes.
the funds, right? How is that different with Reg CF? I mean, if someone, let's say you kick off a campaign, it's a $5 million campaign, you get a couple $100,000 in, can that company get access to that, or do they have to wait till they hit a certain limit?
So in Reg D, let's go through all three of them. In Reg D, there is no minimum limit unless you set one. You can set one in any securities offering. Example, I want to raise $10 million, but $1 million of that is to buy a building that we're going to move our business into, right? If we don't raise that $1 million, it doesn't do any good for us to raise the rest of this money because we need that building. You would do what's called a minimum maximum raise, where if you don't raise $1 million, you don't keep any of the money, right? If you raise $1 million, you keep everything $1 million and up all the way to whatever you're raising. So that's the same with Reg A also. If you want to send a minimum, you can set a minimum, if it makes sense to do it. 99.999% of the Reg D and Reg A offerings do not have a minimum on them. Okay, because you'd have to put it on yourself. It's self-imposed minimum. Reg CF, Regulation CF, where you can raise up to $5 million, you're required to have a minimum. Okay, but you set the minimum yourself. So it's really kind of not a real minimum, but it's one of the things I work with people doing, and you would too. Hey, it's not going to do any good to raise $10,000 here. If you don't raise the first 100, you shouldn't take this money. Set your minimum at 100, because then you can actually do something with it that'll be beneficial for those investors, even if you don't raise the full amount that you're trying to raise. So yes is the answer to your question. You do have a minimum, but the reality is you can set that as low as you want, $5,000, $10,000, and take the money at that point, and anything that comes in beyond that, you get to keep also.
Wow. Yeah, I know we're kind of up on our hour here, but I could chat with you for hours on this stuff, man. So this is great stuff.
Much, so.
No, man, this is we're to talk to an expert like you that's in this field and knows how to knows all the different regulations and what different industries and the experience that you've got, man. This has been a huge for our firm, but also for our listeners and the clients that we work with. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you think is important for our listeners to know about, Reg CF and anything like that? Or
yeah, the one thing I would bring up, Reg CF requires you to use what's called a funding portal or a broker dealer to do the offering on the broker dealer's website. So much like you're talking about Zane Lamprey using Kickstarter, for example. If you're doing a raise for something you're raising money for, and it's not a capital raise, you're not selling stock, you can go on Kickstarter and go, hey, I'm putting out my new hoodie under my, Plepus line, and you can, get the new hoodie for, when it comes out, give us money now. You can do that. You're not selling stocks. There's no securities law. There's nothing to worry about. You can do that whatever you want. When you go to an equity crowdfunding world where you're selling stock, you have all these regulations. And one of them for Reg CF only is that you have to use either a licensed funding portal. So there's several of them out there, different names. I won't advertise any of them out there, but they're names that most people have heard at this point. And then you could also go to a broker dealer who, keep in mind, these people charge you to post your offering. It's usually 5 to 7% of what you raise goes to the broker dealer or to the funding portal for displaying your doing the things they do. But you're required to do that. And there's a big thing going on right now where the funding portals, there's 2 or 3 big ones that are out there that have grown over the last few years, and they're talking about how many millions of investors they have on their portal, and this is the place to be because we have more investors than anyone else. And it always sounds really attractive until you ask them, how many of those people do you think will invest in my company? These investors that came on your platform invested in a flying car or, glow in the dark condoms that speak, or some crazy business. 10,000 of those people invested in that company. They're not going to invest in my Christian bookstore. I mean, it's again, I'm just using the most
Yeah.
extreme examples I can. But that 2 million people, what we find, because I've run offerings on all those platforms, is no matter how big their audience is, about 5% of the money you raise comes from their audience. 95% of the money you raise comes from your marketing efforts as a company anyway.
Mhm.
So you're getting them to do, they act like they're bringing you a lot of investors. They're not, as a general rule. Different sometimes they do, but as a general rule, they're not. So you're still responsible for driving all those investors. And the funding portals tend to be a little more expensive. They don't share data with you, for example. So, Greg, you spend $10,000 on ads and you drive, 1,000 people to that page on their site. You don't get any of the data from those people. You don't even know that they
Wow.
were there unless they invest. You spent the money and they keep the data. When they invest, you get the people's information. So what does that do? You can't go to those people and try and convince them to close the deal if they got excited, start sending them emails, drip campaigns, feeding them more ads, whatever. Can't do any of that. Broker dealers now are getting into the business, and the broker dealers that are in the business are doing things the way we do with Reg A, which is, it's your data. Broker dealer is going to share it with you. They're going to charge you less than the funding portal. They're not going to promise you this big number of investors that aren't going to invest anyway. They're just going to let you basically use their website and have it be regulated to do what you're doing legally, but also give you the data to be successful. And one of the magic things about equity crowdfunding in general that I love to tell people, and nobody believes it until they do it, it's about 25% of the people start to, they get to the page to invest. They start to fill out the forms and then they don't finish for whatever reason. I got to give them my social security number. I don't know about that. I don't know if I want to put that into this form. Wait a minute. They're asking for a credit card. I don't have it with me, or, there's a million different reasons why they drop out. If you don't have someone or some process in place through automated emails or whatever, going back to those people, 0% of them are going to come back and fill out the form. But if you go back to them, you're going to close a huge number of them. And it's generally tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars that you're losing out on when you go to a funding portal because you didn't even know those people existed. And as opposed to you do it through a broker dealer who gives you all the data, or you do it as a Reg A offering where you get the data automatically. That difference in that 5% of their investor base that comes through usually is dwarfed by the amount of money that you can raise if you just follow up on leads that started to invest in it. So it's just one of those little secrets that's out there. And, I try not to badmouth any specific businesses, but it's one of the things that needs to change in the funding portal world, because it's infuriating to know that you're just spending money to drive traffic to them that they're going to then, and, market to every other company that comes to them is going to get that person to be marketed to through that funding portal, versus I just want these people to invest in my company.
So how are you set up? I mean, no, you have a broker dealer set up as well. I mean, how is your company set up? Have you figured out a way to address those downfalls of these platforms?
Yeah, I mean, part of the reason I, along with some partners, bought a broker dealer, and it's not part of my law firm. I don't do it as a lawyer. I'm a passive owner of the broker dealer because I'm not registered with FINRA. I'm not allowed to actually operate it. I do act as their legal counsel, but I did it in part. And my significant other, who has been an investment banker for years, she helps run the offerings there. She's licensed with all the licenses that need to be done. Broker dealers run by a guy named Keith Bliss, who's a Wall Street veteran, and I don't mean that in the bad way. I mean that in a good way. dealing with, a lot of retail investors and things over the last 23 years with a completely clean record. Imagine that, on Wall Street. So
There's
they
a
both,
couple. There's
yeah, I think
not many.
he's one.
Yeah.
So, but the bottom line is they both have been through this with me through various places over the years where we've done it together, and they've seen how this works and they understand how it works. And we've all had the frustrations of dealing with these outside, funding portals that don't share data and things like that. So it just got to the point where, it just made sense to me to go, I can't say it's in the house because it's a separate company and I can't do anything to help promote them. And I won't even mention their name here because I'm a passive owner and I'm not allowed to. But the reality is there's a place there that will do things the right way from all the things that I've learned and my clients have learned from running these CF offerings on these funding portals that don't ever want to share any data with you. And it's just, I'll give you one quick example. I had a company that was raising money. We had an investor come through, and it's rare to get investors that invest more than $5,000 or $10,000 at a time. Usually these are average investments, probably under $1,000 for most of these offerings. But you do get people that come in and invest $25,000, $50,000 every now and then. And so it's not unheard of. It's just pretty rare. Somebody had done a $50,000 investment on one of the funding portals for one of my Reg CF clients about 3 years ago, and they hadn't paid. They committed to it, but the money hadn't come in. And so when you're doing things through Reg A or through the broker dealer I mentioned before, where the data is being shared with you in real time, Greg, you look at it every day and you go, there's a $50,000 investor, there's a $200 investor, there's a $400 investor. You see every person in there, you know who they are. You know if they've paid, you know if they've passed their AML background checks, you know if they've signed this. You can see everything in a nice row there, so you kind of can take action. Hey, let me get my person who makes phone calls to call this person up and go, hey, just checking in to see what's going on. I see you haven't made the payment yet, or I see that something happened here, you didn't sign the subscription agreement. Or most of it's automated through emails, but when those fail, pick up the phone, make a call. You don't get to do that with the funding portals because you don't even know those people exist, right? Mm-hmm. And so when you get someone like that who does this and you don't get their contact information until they become an investor, I'm just looking at a name, John Smith, $50,000. I have no idea where this money is. Where's this money? I'm calling him up. My client's calling him up. Their answer is they're reaching out to them to try and find out. I'm like, we want to reach out. Give us their phone number. Well, we can't do that. I go, why not? Well, it's the law says you can't. I go, well, I helped write the law and regulations. I know that's not the case. So give us the number, and they won't give it to you. And so that guy disappeared, and he was a legitimate guy. We could tell by, where he was from and things that he was a legit guy who could have put that money in. If the CEO of the company had made a phone call to him, if he was allowed to, if we had the phone number, if the funding portal had given that, it's another 50 grand that just got out the window.
Wow.
That's not unusual with these funding portals, and you don't even know it most of the time, and that's the most frustrating thing. So that's why, if you want this system to work, you want to get every investor who wants to invest to be able to invest, and that's why we set it up that way. When I helped put together the systems for this broker dealer. So
wow,
there is a way to do it, and there's other people doing it too. There's other people that got frustrated and started to do this too through broker dealers. I'm not the only one, but it's nice to know that people are figuring out this is about helping people raise money and helping people that want to invest. Mm-hmm. And the funding portals are just set up to let me see how many people I can get into my funnel and keep making money. And I just don't see a lot of follow-up or caring about the companies that are on there.
Interesting. Now, that's we tell we obviously have the commercial side of the business where we're getting in and commercializing and helping launch these companies, and then we have our mastermind, right, where we're letting people come in from the outside and we work with them and mentor them. But I think one of the first messages that we've thrown out there on the marketing side is going, if you pass the buck to somebody else to do this for you, don't, and this, like we've worked with, investment banks before and hired them to pay a lot of, 60, 70 grand. And they're basically just doing paperwork of the investors that you bring to them. But you're right, they won't share that information with you. And you're like, well, what did I just pay for? And so I told people, look, how I learned is, getting my head knocked around a few times and spending way too much time on planes on both coasts, trying to figure this animal of how do you raise money for a pre-revenue company. And we did this with our orthopedics company years ago. It's public now, but it's an art and a science, as you know, like there's no really business school that teaches you how to do this hands-on. And so we said, look, you have to take ownership of this and learn this, because as a business owner, this is critical. Like all
Mhm.
this information is going to be valuable raising money, selling your business, even if you pass the buck. And that's where we come in as a team. And I think where I'm hearing for you, and I want our listeners to, rewind this and play it again, what you just said, which is key, is with your organization, it's literal turnkey. Like you get the
As much as
team,
it can be. Yeah.
you get as much as it can be, but you're providing the guidance, the blueprint of, and
Mhm.
most importantly, the data. Like we show you, you're showing people how this process works and how to maximize their investment and their capital raise to get the goal, right? And
Yep.
some of these other institutions that you've worked with and these other portals is like they're kind of not really a team member, they're just kind of like, hey, we got all these people. I've seen it, right? We got all these. It's like they're not going to be marketing your thing to them. Like, and
Yeah.
you're what I like about your style is that you tell the truth. You show people how to do it. You have got all the examples. You've done this over and over and over again. And it's like bringing on a quarterback, right? And
That's what I call
it's
it. That's why I call it
invaluable.
that. It really is.
Yeah.
It's the I live here in Tampa. It's the Tampa Bay Bucks floundering around for years with a very talented team, but not having a quarterback who could do anything. And then they bring in Tom Brady, who I used to despise.
Same
Tom
here.
Brady, can't stand that guy. Well, wait, now he's the quarterback of my local team. I love Tom Brady. He's the great, takes him to the Super Bowl because that's what happens when you have someone who's running the show that knows what they're doing versus,
Yep.
a very good talent who doesn't understand what it takes to put a team together and do all the things that have to be done.
Yeah, absolutely. And to me, I know people, there's always an investment, right? And it's going, how much is it going to cost you not to
Mhm.
do this right? And
Yep.
I can tell you firsthand, it will cost you way more. And it's not just money, it's stress, it's sleepless nights, it's missing deadlines, it's floundering. And then sometimes if you get to that breaking point, you may not have the capital to do it. So it's going, invest in it now, bring in the team and absorb the information and watch how professionals get it done with you, right? Rather than
Yep.
behind closed doors and yeah, we got all that. And so, man, you're a huge resource for people. And that's why I was so, honored and grateful that you'd, allow, this interview to take place and dialogue with me here online and stuff. But, tell the listeners, how do they find you? Like, how do people get in
Sure.
touch with you and your firm, and how do they do that?
Yeah, it's easy. First of all, because of what I do, my number and email address are all over the internet, so I don't really have any privacy. So I'm happy to always give those out, and it's basically my email is Almerico Law. It's my last name, ALMERICOLAW @gmail.com. Very simple. And my cell phone number is, also online. I'm not going to say it here because sometimes these things crawl and put it in other places, but the reality is the easiest thing to do or go to my website, which is www.almerico.com. But just type my name into Google. Because I've gotten all these kind of, accolades, things have happened. I'm pretty omnipresent. Kendall Almerico, I'm the only one named that in the entire world. Very strange combination of names. And so long and short of it is just Google me and you can find me. And I'm sure, Greg, if somebody wants to get in touch with me, you can also make that happen.
Well, you're the only one we tell people about. So
I appreciate it.
it's easy in my book. So look, Kendall, I appreciate you making time, man. This has been great. I know our listeners and our clients are going to really enjoy this information because this is kind of it's a difficult subject. It's a legal subject, but you're able to distill it down into, the level that I can understand it. So if I can understand, I'm sure our clients can. So yeah,
Remember,
I appreciate it.
I had to understand it myself too. And I like to say I'm a lawyer, but I look at things like I do everything. I look at it like I'm a just regular person who never went to law school, don't have any training. Would I understand this? And
Mhm.
that's why I try to speak like this and try to educate people like this, because that's what you're going to be doing when you're marketing your business to people to invest at this level.
Mhm. Absolutely. Well, Kendall, again, thanks a lot, man. We look forward to
Thanks,
working
Greg.
with you. I know we've got some projects in the pipeline, so I'm sure we'll be chatting shortly.
Sounds great, Greg. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, this is Greg again. I hope you enjoyed that interview with Kendall. Hope you got a lot of information out of it. Are you looking to raise capital for your business? If you are, and you're kind of at a spot of going, do I do a Reg A? Do I do a Reg D, a Reg CF? What investors do I go to? What do they need to see? How do I approach them? All those confusing things. Well, reach out. We're experts at it. We're not your traditional VC. We're expert at raising capital for early stage and growth companies. Just in the fourth quarter of last year, our clients received over 200 million in term sheets. So reach out, book a call. There'll be a link somewhere on this video, and I'll talk to you soon.